Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to WOTS Weekly Features. Today's guest is Rhiannon Ng from the Canadian Science Fair Journal. We'll be talking about the history of the publication and empowering young scientists. I'm Yeli, and I'll be your host. WOTS Toronto operates on land that is the territory of the Huron-Wendat and Paytune First Nations, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation. This territory is the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Confederacy of the Anishinaabeg and Allied Nations to care for and share the resources around the Great Lakes in peace. We encourage you to educate yourself about the land you live on wherever you're tuning in from. All right, so now for our guest. Rhiannon holds an honors Bachelor's of Science from Queen's University in Life Sciences and a minor in Sociology. She is currently pursuing a master's specializing in environmental toxicology at the University of Ottawa, where she's working with the Assembly of First Nations on research into food environments and children in northern communities. Her work in science literacy and communication has been featured in outlets such as Communications Biology, Nature Index, the Science and Technology Awareness Network, and the Canada International Conference on Education. She enjoys hiking, playing the fiddle, and spending time with her friends in her hometown of Chelsea, Quebec. Thank you so much for joining us today, Rhiannon.
Thank you for having me.
I was so excited to chat with you because I am not a science person at all. So all of this is like very new and fun to me. Even reading like communications biology is like, wow, oh my gosh. So I'm so excited to chat with you.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yay. To start off, why don't we go ahead and can you tell us about what the Canadian Science Fair Journal is and kind of how it came to be and what the vision behind that was?
Yeah, absolutely. So the Canadian Science Fair Journal is a free online publication that showcases scientific research by children and youth, so anyone between the ages of 6 and 18. And the journal focuses on like a vast range of topics, including biology, chemistry, environmental chemistry, even there's some like astrophysics, animal behavior, and mental health research. So lots and lots of different topics that that our authors, our children and youth, are interested in. And the projects are released on a monthly basis, and those are all released online, and they're also released 3 times a year in print, and those print issues go to libraries and schools and educators across the country. So the background of the journal was started by myself and my colleague and longtime friend Nina, and we had recognized a total lack of platforms for students to share their research. And at the time, we were looking at science fair winners and what the statistics were around whether they can share their projects beyond like the walls of the gymnasium or wherever they're having a science fair. And it was disappointing to realize that there were no journals available for students of that age to share their projects beyond the science fairs, because those were absolutely wonderful, inspiring, and powerful projects. And so we realized there was definitely a gap there. And not only was there a lack of platforms for sharing that research, but there was also a lack of programming for students of that age to learn how to communicate their science in a way that's meaningful to people who are outside of the immediate like science community or academia. So we wanted to do both of those things to address both of those gaps. So in consultation with some kids, we designed the journal. We designed a mentorship program so that students who submit their work can get paired up with university student mentors who teach them about how to write a science paper. And so we launched it in 2018. So it's still very young, but in the first year, we received hundreds of submissions, and so that was a really powerful moment when we realized that these students had been really waiting for something like this and an opportunity to make their voices louder and share their work with people beyond their immediate science communities.
That's amazing. I I know that when I like personally stumbled upon your website when I was doing research to have folks on, I also recognized that it was something that was like the first of its kind, that there wasn't anything else really out there. So good for you for kind of like stepping up and taking that role. That's so cool. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself personally and why science drives you and why you personally were passionate about
Yeah,
filling in that mission that you saw?
for sure. As you mentioned, I did science in my undergrad, and I'm doing a master's of science right now. But during my undergrad, in my first couple of years at Queen's, I was sort of confronted with this, I don't know, a conundrum because science often is taught to be a very, we're taught from a young age that science has to be detached from its social context. That's what I was taught in university, that the scientific process is takes its identity from being objective, and it shouldn't be influenced by outside factors. But I think that that's really not the case at all. And when conducting any scientific research, it's your responsibility to ask those questions. Who does this research impact? Who does it potentially hurt? How will this research inform policy and vice versa? And especially when we're looking at, any research, but especially in environmental research, climate change research. And so, aside from wanting to create a platform for children to share their work with larger audience, we also, something that drove me was wanting to teach young scientists about the importance of science communication and building that social awareness. And so we wanted to give those students an opportunity to also ask those questions while sharing their work in a journal, to learn about social awareness and become aware of their power, not just as scientists, but also as members of society and potential social change makers. So that's definitely something that personally drove me to doing this work, and which I always think about in my day-to-day when I'm also doing my own research for school. So yeah.
Awesome. So cool. Do you have like a favorite memory from working with the journal, or any like, I don't know, anything stand out to you?
There are a lot. I think, in the past 3 years that we've been in operation, there have been a lot of really heartwarming moments. One that stands out to me was when, I think this was actually the last time I flew in a plane. We went to Fredericton in 2019 to the Canada-wide science fair. This was just a few months after we started the journal, and we had published a couple of issues by then, a couple of print issues, and our first time going to the science fair after that. We walked in the science fair. It was the national finals, so it was all these students from all across the country who were in this, who were at the University of New Brunswick, and they were showing off their projects. So we walked into the big gymnasium, and we were there just to talk to some students and say, like, have you heard of this journal? We would love for you to submit your work. We would love to publish. But when we walked in, like immediately we saw like tons of copies of the journal sitting around at people's booths, and there was one student who he called us over and he was like, I published my work with you guys last year.
Oh,
And he had all these copies and he was handing them out to everyone, and it was really exciting to see how empowering it can be for young students who often don't get their voices heard, to suddenly have their projects with which they've worked on so hard, to see them in paper, in print, and being read by strangers and people that they have never seen before. And so that was a really exciting moment, and definitely one of the most, one of my favorite memories.
that's so sweet. I love that. That's so moving. I can't wait for everything to open up so that we can have all sorts of like fun science conferences again.
I know. I miss those. All of that
Yeah.
free food.
So you mentioned that science literacy is a huge
Mhm.
thing, guys, over at the journal. Could you talk about what exactly science literacy means to you and why it is so important for young people to learn science literacy?
Yeah. So for me personally, I think science literacy means the ability to be able to look at a scientific issue and understand um, how does this issue and what's being done about it relate to me? How does this impact my community and what can I do about it? And it means being able to have those basic tools to understand those concepts and know where to look to learn about them if you don't know them, regardless of your background, whether or not you are a scientist or are interested in science, because science influences all of us regardless of who we are. And I think especially right now, we need to be able to recognize misinformation and false information because it's all around us. And something that science literacy does is it equips us with the tools to be able to critically analyze scientific concepts that are thrown at us every day and be able to recognize when something looks a little suspicious. And I'm thinking mainly in the face of climate change or, like vaccination hesitancy. There are some issues that we all need to be equipped to look at and understand because they do relate to all of us inevitably. And so I think it's important that we teach these skills early on. And I think on the next level, once we're able to do that, it also means being able to respect and advocate for different epistemological standpoints and knowledge frameworks. For example, traditional Indigenous knowledge. So when we have those skills, we're able to branch out and advocate for all voices. And so going back to like for scientists, I think like the students that we're mentoring at the journal, I think promoting science literacy and mutual respect means actively making steps towards dissolving that barrier between science and society. So academics and lay people. So for young people who want to be scientists, like our authors, it's really important for them to learn about what science literacy is and what they can do to improve it for everybody.
Totally. Awesome. And then you mentioned that another part of your like mission and vision is
Yeah.
uplifting young scientists and like how that can help us in the future in regards to
Mhm.
like climate change and tons of other ecological issues. Can you like speak a little bit to that as well?
Yeah, for sure. Something that totally blew our mind was that I mean, now we're 3 years into this project, and we're finding that almost half of all the articles that are submitted to us are on the topic of climate change or green energy or sustainability. And we don't choose those numbers; those are just the articles that come into our inbox, and this is what the young scientists today are choosing to look at. And I think that kids really feel this urgency to combat climate change so desperately, and they haven't normalized the climate disaster in the same way that adults have. And so they're actively doing all that they can in their communities with the scientific tools that they have at their disposal to tackle these problems. And a lot of these projects are community based and solution driven and extremely creative. And so um, I think, I mean, youth are not given a lot of democratic power in society. And so it's even more important that we amplify the voices that are there already so that we can help them to drive change in their own communities. Um, to give an example, we were working with some students this year, some high school students who were working on forest fire detection technologies in their hometowns in Alberta and BC. And these are more than just science fair projects at this point. So the question is not, well, why should we listen to them? They're just kids. It's more, oh, what's going to happen if we don't?
Mm, totally. Wow. I can't imagine being a kid and developing something like that. That's
I
so
know,
cool. So mind blowing.
my mind is blown like every day with just like the sheer amount of work and dedication these kids are putting into their work, into their research. It's
Absolutely. Are there any um Are there any other articles that you'd like to highlight? Like, do you have any favorite projects over the past few years that you've loved?
Oh yeah, one of my favorite ones, I think. I mean, there are a lot. There are a lot of projects that I could go on and on, but all of the projects are in our archives online, so anyone can go read them. But one that really stood out to me was a 14-year-old girl from Tara, Ontario. Um, she submitted her project a couple years ago. Her name is Maisie, and 14 years old, you're only like just starting high school, and she was really interested in sustainable farming and agriculture. And she was also like a computer scientist at the age of 14. So
Wow.
she, the purpose of her research or her project was to develop a solar powered automated greenhouse that could be monitored and controlled remotely. So you could like monitor and control it on a computer from kilometers away. And her prototype, she built a prototype. It only used solar power. She was able
Oh
to
my
program it to censor like temperature, humidity, light and water levels, and moisture, all those things. And she was able to build it and it worked. She had it running for about a month and then she was like, okay, I know that this works. I'm going to go and publish a project on it now. And it was really, really cool to see how her process worked, from recognizing the problem, recognizing that people might need to grow their own vegetables in the future, and also all of the greenhouse gases and the pollution and degradation that is caused by food production and transportation.
Mhm.
That's such a huge problem. And she was like, I'm going to do something about that. And she did. And just seeing that project come to life and seeing how moved she was that she could share it with like everyone or broad audiences across the country after it was published was really nice and really powerful. And she was very, very excited and humble as well. So that was definitely one of those projects that I always think about, I always remember.
So cool. Wow.
Mhm.
How does one like go about submitting their work to the journal? Specifically, what does that process look like?
Yeah, we have a submission portal online on our website. We recognize that some students don't participate in science fairs. Some students might not have the material resources to participate in science fairs. So we are really open to projects of at any level or at any point along the route of their progression. So sometimes we have students just submit projects, pictures of their poster board that they've used at a science fair, and our mentors are there to help students take their projects and bring them to life in the form of a scientific article. So that's why we have a mentorship program, and so we have a submissions portal online, and we invite students from everywhere, as long as they have an internet connection, to submit their work in whatever format works for them. We do have some little like submissions guidelines, but yeah, and so once they submit their project, we don't reject publications. We don't reject submissions. Our goal is to empower students to make the improvements to their article in whatever way they need to before publication. So again, that's why we have a mentorship program. So those students who submit are then paired with a university student who's been trained to work with children and youth. And yeah, they work one-on-one for a while. They get some constructive feedback. They learn about like how to communicate their work in a way that's meaningful, and then it'll go on to publication.
That's so cool. That sounds like such a meaningful learning process for the students to go through together.
Yeah, I think it also is a really meaningful process for the mentors themselves. A lot of the time, you learn you learn by teaching.
Yes,
So yeah.
absolutely.
Mhm.
On the flip side of that, what are some ways that readers and scientists and non scientists like myself can
Mhm.
uplift and support all of the work that you do?
Yeah, well, we have a store online where we do our best to make everything in the journal open access and free, to just for accessibility reasons. Um, so all of the articles are free online. We do send print copies to educators to use in their classrooms. So teachers often ask that same question, and we'll come away with an idea of the idea to use these articles in the classroom to teach their students about science literacy using research that's already done by students. So we do have issues online for purchase. So people who would like to read the journal can go online and they can purchase copies that they'll be mailed to them, and that also helps the organization and helps to keep us on our feet as well. But yeah, we also have social media channels and a great social media team, and that's where a lot of our communication happens. And so anything and everything to uplift the voices of these students is so welcome and appreciated.
Excellent. I was kind of creeping your Twitter account, and I love all of the like little retweets and stuff that you guys have on there. Definitely recommend following them on Twitter. And then last but definitely not least, what are like your hopes for the future of the journal? Do you see it growing in any way? What would you like to see come out of that?
Yeah, we're still sort of the journal took off when it was started in 2018, and we're still figuring out our vision for the future. But something we know that we want to do is start to connect. If we want to start to connect these young researchers with people in their communities who can help to bring their projects to life even further. So. A lot of the students, like I was mentioning before, their projects are extremely community-based and solution-oriented. So they're looking at solutions to issues that they see right on their doorsteps. And so even though publishing their article in a journal is a big part of the process of bringing those projects to life, we want to start looking at ways to connect those students with local policymakers or local governments, even other scientists in the area who can help them to bring those projects to life in a way that is meaningful and impactful to them, while also allowing those students to maintain the agency over their work. So something that we want to do is definitely highlight that aspect of the research and of the journal in the future.
So exciting. I imagine that community is so important just in general in science.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that we like didn't get a chance to talk about or didn't cover?
I don't think so. Those were all such good questions. My mind is going
Cool.
now. I'm like,
Awesome.
thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for chatting with us. It's been a blast. It's been such a good combo.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you for joining us. To find out more about the Canadian Science Fair Journal, please go to csfjournal.com. This has been today's WOTS Weekly Feature. For discounts and deals, check out toronto.thewordonthestreet.ca/weekly-features. And from all of us at WOTS, happy Science and Tech Week.